Higurashi no Naku Koroni is one of the most well-known and beloved doujin visual novels of all time, with its market success giving birth to the When They Cry franchise, which would see further installments such as Umineko and Kikonya, and enabling its small team of creators, known as 7th Expansion, headed by Ryakishi 7, to continue to produce an array of original works to the present day and beyond. Like a lot of doujin games, the development history of Higurashi is one that is every bit as fascinating as it is messy and ramshackle, and this video offers a glimpse into that convoluted journey, cobbled together from various interviews Ryakishi and his team have given over the years. We start, of course, with the humble beginnings of the man behind Higurashi and 7th Expansion himself, Ryakishi 7, whose name, by the way, is technically pronounced Ryakishi Zero Nana, or alternatively Ryakishi Rei Nana, the second pronunciation being a reference to the origins of the moniker, the character Lena from Final Fantasy V, also known as Reina. Like most game developers, Ryakishi grew up a gamer himself, starting with Game & Watch, Famicom, and PC games. He references Gamist, a magazine covering arcade games, as one of his childhood sources of gaming-related media. In one of his interviews, Ryakishi was asked whether or not he had played Chunsoft's detective-style adventure game, The Portopia Serial Murder Case, growing up, as the game was well known for inspiring many of the more modern mystery-adventure games that followed, in addition to there being a direct reference to the game in Umineko, but he admits that he did not play it until later in his life. As far as games of its ilk are concerned, however, his induction to this niche subgenre was by way of the adventure game Mystery House by Roberta Williams, which managed to convey a foreboding sense of dread in spite of its minimalistic graphics, a feat which would prove quite inspirational to Ryakishi during his time as a doujin creator. Doujin circles were quite small and niche during Ryakishi's childhood, but by the time he was in his late teens, they had started to gain traction, with Tokyo's comic market, or Komiket, the marketplace mecca for selling one's homegrown, mostly derivative fanworks, having grown from a modest several thousand attendees to crossing the six-figure attendance mark around that time. As for Ryakishi, he could be found sketching manga in the same notebook he used for class notes, and applied for a circle recruitment ad during high school, though that didn't end up panning out. Nonetheless, with his heart still set on entering the world of professional game development, Ryakishi enrolled in a vocational art school, but would find it lacking in the real-world hands-on experience needed to truly make it as a developer, and would decide, in the end, to change trajectories and join the workforce. First at an undisclosed company for 3 months, then as a civil servant for 10 years in a district of Tokyo. As the years flew by, doujin circles would grow even more in popularity, and Ryakishi, now in his 20s with a full-time career and seeking a creative outlet, ended up joining a circle which was centered around creating seinen manga. After a few years contributing to this group, Ryakishi and his younger brother Yadazakura decided to take their creative endeavors in a more ambitious direction by formally founding their own doujin circle known as 7th Expansion. The circle was founded with trading card games in mind, as Ryakishi had also been an avid fan of TCGs growing up, specifically mentioning Magic the Gathering. 7th Expansion's initial project came in the form of design and illustration work for expansion sets for the card game Leaf Fight. Ryakishi served as the illustrator, and many of Higurashi's character designs drew clear and obvious inspiration from his efforts on the project. Notable targets of 7th Expansion's Leaf Fight efforts included the popular romance visual novels Air by Key and Pia Carrot by Cocktail. Their work on Leaf Fight would continue for about 2 years, even overlapping with the development of Higurashi, as Ryakishi would sometimes bundle a free copy of Higurashi's first episode, Onikakushi, with Leaf Fight orders as a form of promotion for the game. 2 years into 7th Expansion's life, Yadazakura suggested that the team cut their teeth on a major original production, specifically a visual novel, prompted largely by the popularity and recent success of Type Moon's Tsukihime, released during 2000's Winter Komiket. It was around this time that Ryakishi met, through Komiket, his 2B 7th Expansion team member, BT, who would go on to serve as the group's homepage administrator, as well as take charge of the technical aspects of the project. Yadazakura took up the mantle of producer and scripter for the game, leveraging the open-source Nscripter, the same development engine Tsukihime was built on. With Tsukihime laying both the motivational and technical foundation for Higurashi, it's no wonder why Higurashi has an entire character dedicated to the game, in the form of Chie-sensei. With this, the seeds of Higurashi were sown, and the team of Rikishi 7, Yadazakura, and BT, alongside 4U, who had joined around the same time as BT and who would primarily handle the scripting of the intermission and tips, set out to begin development. Higurashi began life as a theater script called Hinamizawa Teiryujo, or Hinamizawa Bus Stop, as Rikishi had connections with the world of theater through friends who were studying theater and or performed with local troupes. Bus Stop was written for a local 100,000 yen amateur stage play competition, and the script was very short, as it was intended to be performed for an hour-long troupe graduation ceremony. Bus Stop's aesthetic was that of idyllic small-town horror, taking place at, well, a bus stop on the outskirts of a remote and sleepy rural village, starring prototype versions of Mion Sonozaki and Rika Furude, and revolving around the ominous mystery of a series of grisly murders, all inspired by the works of Seishi Yokomizo, most notably Village of Eight Graves, a hallmark murder mystery title in Japanese fiction. Rikishi likened Bus Stop to the works of Stephen King, also citing the Blair Witch Project as a chief inspiration, desiring to see the unique atmosphere and spirit of Blair Witch molded into something that would resonate with Japanese audiences. In fact, the tips segments in Higurashi were directly inspired by the found footage style horror that Blair Witch is renowned for. Rikishi intended for Higurashi to be horror first and foremost, leveraging Bus Stop's themes, characters, dreary, chilling atmosphere, and suspenseful, disorienting twists as a foundation. He envisioned being able to juxtapose that horror against a backdrop of both comedy and everyday life, ideally in a way such that readers would go in expecting something akin to a straightforward dating sim / galgay, only to find themselves blindsided as the story unraveled, even going so far as to refer to the novel's unassuming art style as Higurashi's first trap. It should therefore come as no surprise that Higurashi's horror aesthetic drew much inspiration from the first adventure game advertised as a sound novel, Otoguriso, released in 1992 for the Super Famicom as the flagship title for Chunsoft, directed by its founder and president, Koichi Nakamura. Fans of Danganronpa may know the prequel, Kirigiriso, which acts as both a sequel to and crossover with Otoguriso. Other sources of inspiration named by Rikishi include Chunsoft's follow-up horror mystery sound novel, Kamaitachi no Yoru, and a slew of titles that chased after Kamaitachi no Yoru's success, such as Zakuro no Aji, Gakko da Ata Kowai Hanashi, and Majotachi no Nemuri. On the slice of life and comedy side, Rikishi drew inspiration from the popular romance VNs Air and Kanon, as he believed the magic of Ki lay in how the games leveraged memorable climactic moments of heightened drama and melancholy to recontextualize all of the breezy, silly, lackadaisical hijinks that came before, imbuing them with a sense of profound emotional wistfulness. This technique would be utilized throughout Higurashi's narrative, but with the climactic scenes instead consisting of shocking violence or psychological terror. Rikishi also cites Shizuku, Touhart, and Kizuato by Studio Leaf as inspirations, with Shizuku's influence particularly prevalent as it was one of the pioneering works that was principally focused on combining atmospheric horror with elements of eroge to create a uniquely disturbing and skin-crawling experience. Interestingly, despite the clear stylistic similarities between Shizuku and Higurashi, specifically in terms of the character sprite designs, Rikishi's initial vision for Higurashi was much closer in line with the likes of Otoguriso or Kamaitachi no Yoru, a purely sound and text-based experience with no character sprites whatsoever to detract from the methodically crafted, haunting, and tense ambiance, hence why Higurashi is often marketed as a sound novel, borrowing from Chunsoft's branding. In crafting Higurashi's narrative, Rikishi leveraged his decades' worth of experience working as a civil servant to ensure bureaucratic realism. He was particularly adamant about depicting law enforcement accurately and respectfully, stating that he wanted to convey the bureaucratic pressure and scrutiny that police are constantly operating under, and all the red tape they need to cut through to become directly involved, even in times of crisis. His experience as a civil servant also influenced the way the Sonozaki family carry themselves, and the hyper-traditionalist values they so proudly and defiantly cling to, specifically mentioning the characterization of the Sonozaki's family matriarch. When coming up with Higurashi's setting, Rikishi and Yadazakura leafed through a guidebook they had on hand that chronicled the 100 most beautiful villages of Japan, deciding on Shirakawa on a whim. Of course, Rikishi visited the village during the game's production, rewriting parts of Higarashi's first episode based on his travels, claiming Shirakawa to be a beautiful place that retains the atmosphere of old Japan. During the first 3 episodes of Higurashi, Onikakashi, Watanagashi, and Tatari Goroshi, which were released between 2002 and 2003, debuting biannually at Comiket, the game sold poorly, achieving only a few dozen copies for Onikakashi, though Watanagashi and Tatari Goroshi saw minor increases in sales, prompting the printing of slightly more copies for each subsequent Comiket. Faced with meager overall sales numbers, Rikishi turned to promotional tricks such as the aforementioned Leaf Fight bundle, as well as offering to send subsequent episodes for free to anyone who contacted 7th Expansion with feedback on how to improve the game. The turning point came after the release of Tatari Goroshi, when BT proposed that Onikakashi be released online for free as a demo. The software for this trial version inadvertently contained the data for both Watanagashi and Tatari Goroshi, which people were able to quickly reverse engineer to gain access to all 3 available episodes for free, something that contributed to Higurashi's success as the game quickly went viral throughout online communities, sparking a massive wave of interest and demand, with the buzz surrounding the game's strong characters, gripping mystery, and haunting atmosphere. At this point, around the time of the release of Higurashi's 4th chapter, Himatsubushi, in August 2004, the fervor around Higurashi had grown large enough to earn the game a spot on the shelves of major doujin outlets, such as Akihabara's Toru no Ana, further increasing the game's footprint and accessibility to newcomers. 7th Expansion, which had previously been using only royalty-free music, was finally able to bring aboard dedicated producers such as Dai and Preholder to compose pieces for Higurashi's soundtrack. While undoubtedly pleased with and humbled by the game's burgeoning success, Rikishi considers this general period to be the roughest and most stressful, as he was forced to juggle both his full-time job and development work on the game under the burden of rapidly mounting expectations. In one interview, he sheepishly admits that somewhere between 1/3 to 1/2 of Higurashi may have been written while he was on the job, claiming to have mastered the shortcuts to switch between his actual work and the document containing the game's script, in addition to writing the script itself in a minuscule font, such that it wasn't legible to anyone peeking over his shoulder. On the flip side, starting from Himatsubushi onward, sales would eventually grow to a point where Rikishi was able to quit his career job and give 7th Expansion his full-time attention. Thanks to the team's continued and tireless efforts, Higurashi's success skyrocketed, going from, at most, a few hundred copies for Tatari Goroshi to tens of thousands of copies for Himatsubushi, all the way to a staggering 100,000 copies just prior to August of 2006 when the final episode, Matsuri Bayashi, was released, cracking the elusive 6-figure barrier that had been broken once before by, as fate would have it, Type Moon's Tsukihime. Of course, Higurashi's popularity was bolstered by the release of an animated adaptation by Studio Deen, airing earlier in April of that year, which really carried the franchise to new, more mainstream audiences in Japan, and also overseas, as Higurashi's unique confluence of horror and moe caused quite a stir within Western online communities. The 2006 Deen adaptation was a modest success, its first volume coming in at around 4,000 copies. While not a blowout sales-wise, it's worth remembering Higurashi's underdog status with its doujin origins, and the fact that it faced stiff competition from behemoths such as Haruhi Suzumiya, and even Type Moon's own Fate Stay Night adaptation, also by Studio Deen. Its second season, Higurashi Kai, fared better in 2007, releasing in the more lukewarm summer season and coming in at 7,000 copies. A manga adaptation in 2005. Concerning the adaptations, it's worth noting that Rikishi was advised by Type Moon to maintain a watchful eye over the production process, to ensure that any liberties taken did not compromise the spirit of Higurashi, as Tsukihime's 2003 animated adaptation had tragically fallen victim to this creative pitfall. To that end, Rikishi personally oversaw the scripts, worked with the seiyuu to ensure the line reads were faithful, and even occasionally appeared on set during the filming of the live-action movie. Since then, Higurashi has continued to thrive. In August of 2007, just 1 year after the release of its final episode, Matsuri Bayashi, it was reported that over 500,000 copies of the sound novel had been sold, setting the foundation for fresh, new adaptations, which started springing up closer and closer to the present day, with a handful of animated OVAs released in the years following the conclusion of the Deen adaptation, a live-action TV drama in 2016, a MOBA in 2020, and, of course, a full-fledged anime original sequel to the sound novel storyline in the form of Higurashi Go and Sotsu, also airing in 2020, ensuring the franchise's longevity by introducing Higurashi to a whole new generation, nearly 2 decades after the development of Onikakashi first began. What started as a humble, one-off theater script and passion project had blossomed into a sweeping, industry-wide phenomenon. While not as wildly popular when viewed alongside the likes of its Type Moon brethren, Higurashi nonetheless achieved something profoundly special and enduring through its success. Paying homage to the medium's progenitors, that is, the text-based horror mystery adventure games of the 80s and 90s, and ensuring their legacy would not soon be forgotten, by bringing them into the modern era with a much-needed creative facelift, combining their immersive, haunting atmosphere and gripping narrative with the strong and relatable character writing of the more contemporary dating sims, yielding a design aesthetic that still holds up to this day and will likely continue to hold up far into the future. In one of 7th Expansion's interviews following the release of Higurashi's final episode, the team likens the privilege of being able to work on such a fulfilling endeavor to be a miracle, that only the unwavering support of the fans prevented the project from petering out in its first half, and that it really took the perfect storm to bring the game to its proper conclusion in a blaze of glory. In other words, it was the fans who, through their undying love and passion for Higurashi, its world, its story, and its unforgettable cast of characters, managed to craft the perfect fragment that Ryakishi and team were able to grasp and reach the happy ending they so desired, with all of their ardent fans right there by their side.